Alright, using our Z-epoxy again, I'm going to stir this up. 60-40 mix again. And we're going to brush our inside, all the wood and all the exhaust for fuel proofing. Be careful you don't put any on the elevator rods and the bearings. I cut a bunch of strips of carbon fiber, and we're going to pre-soak them all. Because we're going to lock in our wood mount, our 3/16 aircraft plywood, to the fuselage. This mount is going to be very solid. When in doubt, carbon fiber, I always say. That carbon fiber just works so nice with this foam. Using a stick, you can get into those hard to reach areas. Mark your rudder. And use an X-Acto knife and slice it off. The rudder is very effective on the F-16N. And sand it smooth. Draw a center line. Center line on the rudder. Mark it and sand it. Sand to shape. That's nice. Works great. Make your slices for your easy hinges. Using 3 of them. Epoxy those in, and then we're going to epoxy our vertical using your rudder torque rod as a guide. Center right up on the fuselage seam line, and tape that thing in place. And we got a square here, look good, and we'll tape it in place and we'll re-square it up. Wingtip on the F-16 are all blocked up, and we'll check our square again. You can skip back and line it up. Once it's all dry, we're going to use our 5-minute epoxy and some baby powder, mix up a kind of a thick batch, and just smear it in as a fillet. Attach a piece of carbon fiber from the fuselage to the vertical and tape that in place. We used 5-minute epoxy. That locks that whole piece in. The fuselage and the vertical become as one. Check out our torque rod. Look inside the fuselage, make sure everything's working real nice, and then line it up with your rudder. Make your marks and melt a hole. And we'll hinge it right up here. A little epoxy in your hinge lines, and a little on the hinge. A little bit on that torque rod, and we'll fit our rudder. Oh, looking good. Missile racks. Just mark your middle, epoxy the wing, and put them right on. They point down 4 degrees, just like the wingtip. We have the same amount of washout. Makes that plane come in real nice and stable. You can add in a cut piece for your exhaust. Epoxy it in and then fill it with spackle. Cut off your fuselage levelers and then smooth them out. Some sandpaper and then some spackle. Looking good. Let's epoxy on our ventrals. Note there is a left and a right side. And just follow the line. Your outside fingers should conform. That's your lineup. You'll get those on real nice and straight. And once they're dry, we're going to put a little fillet around the crack. And wipe it with our finger. Want it nice and smooth. Make your marks for your tail hook and drill a 1/4 inch hole. Don't go all the way through. Alright, stuff in a piece of carbon fiber and fill that area up with epoxy. Get your tail hook and place it right on top of that carbon fiber. Drop some epoxy in there. And wrap a piece of carbon around the rod so as to hold it and take it all the way to the back. And get another one for the front. And just kind of pull it tight. This is going to be tough. And straighten out your tail hook and pull them tight. Let that dry. We're going to balance all our elevators with a 1/2 ounce of lead. I'm going to melt a hole there in the elevator and we'll push our lead in. Once it goes in, we'll put some 5-minute epoxy in there and glue it right in. This keeps any nasty flutters away. And epoxy your splitter in place. Final spackle everything. Spackle up where the wing and the fuselage meets and wet sand it when it's dry. Use a fan. Fans work real nice. We're going to get that nice and smooth. That spackle is so easy to sand wet sanding. We're going to glass this area with a 3/4 ounce glass cloth again. Get our strake up front, and using the denatured alcohol and Z-epoxy, we'll just brush it on. We'll do both top and bottom. Spackle up any remaining areas that need it, and we're going to wet sand. Using 100% acrylic primer, water base. Mix it up, about a 60-40 ratio with water, and we're going to prime our fuselage. Be sure and use a mask. Okay, let's wet sand this. 320 grit sandpaper. We can make a sand hand glove using the 3M spray adhesive. Just attach that sandpaper right to the glove. This works really nice. I love it. And the sanding glove will smooth your plane out. And let's do all the parts. We'll spray it with a light gray, the white, for our color. There's the top. You can do that with a spray can if you want. This part really needs an airbrush. You could do it with a can, but the airbrush is the way to go. This is a Badger airbrush. I've been using this one for years. Paint your stencils. Oh boy, she's coming alive now. The white and the blue and the gray, they go so good together. There's the top and there's the bottom. Let's do our exhaust. We painted that with titanium paint, and then using our template, we're using burnt metal in the airbrush, and then we're going to go flat black over that. to really define our line. Those would be our turkey feathers. There we go. We're going to clear coat the whole plane now with just a polyurethane. The plane really doesn't get that dirty from fuel, but if any gets on it, we want to protect it. Pay special attention to the rear area. You could also use a black Baron if you wanted to, but this is the preferred method, and polyurethane is relatively inexpensive. Always use a mask, and we removed our tape from our canopy. Looking good, and we're ready to go. Okay, gonna mount our engine in. We're using the tune pipe on this one. Let's find our balance point, and we're gonna balance. Let's hook up our air system and operate the valve, and find a servo. I like to use a mini servo for this operation, and we're gonna tape with masking tape the air valve. We're going to epoxy this right into the fuselage, right onto the tape. Put the tape on the servo, and I'm just using a little epoxy. We're going to epoxy in our air valve first. We'll hold that tight, that way we can adjust our servo later. Just holding the servo down, we'll operate it, make sure our travel's correct. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So let's epoxy our servo down. And we have this on the retract line. The Robart air tank is a little big, so we're going to have to cut out a little bit of foam for it. Just get a file and take away a little bit of foam. And fit it in. Should be behind that hole right there. And vacuum out any of your foam scraps. And let's try our line. We're using a 1200 milliamp pack here. You need the same. Using carbon fiber and 5-minute epoxy, we have 2 strips together here, and we're going to put it right in alongside the furthermost side of the fuselage. And do both sides. And we'll place in our servos. And using our template as a guide, we're going to cut our wood pieces so our servos can mount on them, and adjust them on in, and then we're going to drill and screw them down. Once we have it as a single unit, we'll epoxy that whole unit in right on the carbon fiber with 5-minute epoxy. We used a little baby powder to make it thick so it didn't run, and that'll lock right in real nice. Put our 1200 milliamp pack in, and let's mark our servos. Elevator, throttle, elevator, and we're going to start plugging them in. We got Y connectors on the aileron, the rudder, and the elevators. And try everything, make sure everything works real nice. And once satisfied everything works good, wrap your wires up and stuff them down into that hole. Fit your antenna in your antenna tube and mark where your 256 wire is going to work on your elevators. Using a Z bender. Love this tool. Everyone should have one. Make a Z-bend, and then we'll cut off the tip. Fit it onto our servo. Those are our elevators. Do our ailerons. our trusty Z-bender. That's looking good. Let's put our rudder on, cut our cable and solder our link on. Cool it down with a sponge after you cook it, and put our snap link on and attach it to the servo arm. We also have our head hooked up here with a 256 wire. And let's take our throttle and adjust that. Trusty Z-bend, and everything's working. Okay, we're going to tie down those cables with some carbon fiber, 5-minute epoxy. Stuff it in. We have a piece of 1/8 by 1/4 spruce stick in there that's all gluing to. It'll lock everything right in. Put a piece under for your rudder, and everything's going to work real nice now. Put a bunch of epoxy in there. We don't want this to move at all. And melt out a hole for your air fill. Just melt out a hole. And kind of dig it out. And put tape around our air fill. Got our little nipple hanging out. And just apply some epoxy to it and fit it in the hole. We just want just the tip of the nipple hanging out so we can attach our air hose when we pump it up. Pump up the pressure. And we're going to put our switch on now. Wrap tape around it. Just epoxy right to the side. And fit your hatch to it and kind of melt out the areas where needed. And make your slot so you can turn it on and off without opening up the hatch. And everything's working nice and tight. Got your elevators, ailerons, the head and the rudder, and your throttle. And of course your retract gear right in the corner there. There we go. Put some foam in there, stuff in that receiver. Run up your engine. Your engine should be broken and working flawlessly. Check all your flight surfaces that they're working properly. Your engine will cool from the intake. As long as it's rich enough, it'll work. And let's taxi it around. Get used to the plane. We don't want to hurry this process whatsoever. Doesn't that look sweet?